What's going on, creators? Yeah, just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I'd like to continue the conversation on mental diets and hopefully add something positive to your mental diet for today. Really, I got a couple things wrote down on the old agenda, one of which has to do with perception and kind of stepping out of these narratives that the media is kind of projecting out there, realizing that that's just a manifestation of collective consciousness, but realize that every day that we're putting our energy out there instead of focusing inwardly, we're just kind of creating the same loops. And so really want to bring that to you guys' awareness and attention to, if anything, when you see what's going on in like the media, to look within yourself and see if maybe you are on some level maybe guilty of something that they are actively promoting, and if not, seeing if it somehow triggers you, like it made maybe they say something that made you just kind of want to attack them or just like lash out, like how dare they, say that, or they're just full of shit and blah blah blah. Did they say something that just challenged a part of what you've created around your identity? A big part of like getting triggered, especially by labels, is a lot of times those labels are things that we've made part of our identity, and being triggered by that, an easy way to kind of revise that, instead of just sitting there spinning out for hours on end, realize it's only ever now. It's like right now is when you feel peace and joy, and it's not coming tomorrow. It's always a battle to stay at rest. And a lot of times, nothing happens by accident or coincidence. Oh, it's just a coincidence. It's like all these things are just coincidences all the time. And it's like, how ironic, but like, and that has to do too with, looking at, kind of like the Great Reset versus like the Great Awakening. It's all a matter of how you are defining what's happening outside of yourself. So if you're looking outwardly to like the system to save you, or the system to be dramatically different, or any of these types of like external attributes to kind of trigger an inward feeling of like, oh, I just need this, I need some hero to save me so I can feel free. Yeah, it's like once you realize that you feel free first, I mean, that's God given. God gives you freedom. Man doesn't give you freedom. And if you, as a matter of fact, if you are looking outwardly to like a man or institution or government or any of these types of things, not to say that these are bad institutions, but me personally, when it comes to like the powers and principalities that the Bible talks about, I think those are our thoughts and beliefs about those institutions mainly. Not to say that there's not corruption and all this kind of bullshit that's out there, but it's just how we are looking towards these institutions. When it comes to like freedom, you have people making the assumption of like, oh, if we just keep going along with this authoritarian agenda, then we'll get our freedoms back. Like these people that can just, let me just write a paragraph and now hold up this piece of paper. I solved the problem. I solved the problem. I wrote a mandate and now it's fixed. God gives you your freedom, and so like and when you look to these authoritarians to do it, it's just going to continue to enslave you, which is something maybe not a lot of people realize. Because I was having a conversation with someone the other day. I think it's really hard for people that are honest and decent people to kind of put themselves in like the shoes of like a predatory person. It's like, well, why would they lie? It's like, well, why wouldn't they? If they can get away with it, why would they? And then you just do what they say. Why wouldn't they lie? It's like the same thing. It's like you see a track record of lies and deception, but outwardly the person might be like in a position of authority and power and this and that, and it's like, well, why would they lie? Well, why wouldn't they? I don't know how to really elaborate more than that. It's like, well, why is this criminal lying to me? It's what they do. It's just what happens in that state of consciousness. This is how it is. It's like, why did this snake bite me? Why did this scorpion sting me? it's just something scorpions do. It's just, but not to sit there and judge, like predatory people. Like a lot of times these people are predatory because they're in so much fear and delusions themselves. It's like a lot of times, if you take a big enough step back from what's happening or what you're perceiving to happen, it's like, realize that everything is going on according to God's will. Everything's happening for a reason. Everything's happening for a purpose. And how these things can, kind of like appear intense, is maybe one way to describe it. It's very common when you're changing states of consciousness, going from the old beast system to the new system, the kingdom of God, heaven on earth type, vibe, that ultimately you can start to connect with more and more so as you go within, it's like follow the advice of Jesus to seek the kingdom of God, which is within you first, and to seek his righteousness, God's righteousness, and then all these other things will just start to be added. And so, keeping that in mind, it's really helpful, when you start moving in that direction, and you might be faced with all this external resistance, which is a lot of ways just your fears being projected outwardly, for you to kind of see what's been holding you into this like system, and so it's not unheard of or uncommon at all. I've experienced it many times, going through my evolution, where it's just like facing fear, but in that fear, when you face it, you grow your faith, and the more that you grow your faith, the more that you're kind of just embodying states of love, which is ultimately just the contrast of fear, the states of fear, which at the root error of that is an identity based on the idea that you are separate, like you are a separate brain and a body that's separate from people, separate from circumstances, separate from God, separate from everything, and like your thoughts have no bearing on anything. They just, you have a thought, it fades away to oblivion, and that's just that. You can, and you can think murderous thoughts of people, hoping people die, and then there's no consequence to that. But there is consequences to even our thoughts, because the seeds of the thoughts, for one, they correspond to states, but they don't just fade away. It's like we start to steward our own consciousness on a lot of different levels through our life and our relationships, our maybe power level, just, all of these little like, attributes of like society and just being human, I guess, where if you instead of like always projecting to the future, looking at what is going on right now in this specific moment, as everything that you have, your relationship, your spouse, your money, your career, your this, your that, it all corresponds exactly to your state of consciousness, who your inner man, your state of being. It's like I don't know, it's kind of difficult to put into words, but it's like when you can kind of close your eyes and just kind of turn off the outside world, let go of a lot of the lies and the programming, Santa Claus and Easter Bunny and this and that these stories that we tell ourselves about things, and just get into like the present moment. What's keeping you from experiencing happiness or at least peace? What's causing you to have these anxieties and in these fears? We're to cast our cares and concerns to God, to help us correct those thoughts, but like look at them, as the walls of resistance that's keeping you, that's stealing your joy and stealing your peace right now. It's like, are you going to continue to let that steal from you, or is it time to make a new choice and choose to be at peace? Choose to let these things go. Choose to forgive, instead of just having vengeance towards shit. It's really easy for the old like state of being, the old man, as the Bible would describe it, to constantly just want revenge and vengeance on others, and we can spend all day in those vengeance thoughts. And by having, by choosing to stay in those vengeance thoughts, like that mind thinks that it's a good thing for some reason, and it almost kind of feels productive, even though after a while you start to go, well, wait a minute, it's still now. How long am I going to continue just to be vengeful, and wanting, some vengeance on somebody else for some wrong that maybe took 10 seconds of my day? And it's like I've been spinning out like for hours about this. Then and it's like makes it easier once you kind of create that space. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of chill out, kind of see the thoughts, feel the emotions, but not become like that's who I am. Because again, a lot of these are problems with identity and kind of holding on to things that no longer really serve us in any type of meaningful way. And a lot of times they're things that are actually hurting us and causing these destructive loops, these patterns to keep happening over and over again in the present moment. And so it's like, where like the old mind is like thinks, oh, I can just have these vengeance thoughts for hours and hours, and then it has no bearing on anything else. What tends to happen is that as you start to embody that state, your perception of reality starts to mirror that more and more. And it's like now all of a sudden you got all these triggering things like, oh, I stubbed my toe, motherfucker. It's like, oh, I hit every single red light. Oh, somebody in front of me is just dicking around, just taking their sweet time. Now I'm late. Now then just this cascade of issues. And I started to notice that in myself when I quit smoking cigarettes, because I was like dealing with a lot of anger issues, because like I think a lot of my smoking, I enjoyed it while I was doing it for a while, but then I don't know, a couple years ago, there was like a switch where it was like kind of like taking anger and aggression out. It was like a stress relieving thing. It was like, oh, I'm starting to spin out, I'm going to go smoke, and then I'd feel, better. But what I didn't realize is like I was, instead of like dealing with anger in like a healthy way, where I just like feel the emotions and kind of let it go, I was like burying it and like kind of intensifying it and like not processing it in a way that was like, I don't know. It just didn't feel like I was processing it as well as I could. And then it kind of got brought to my attention as like, just like my will to live was real low, just because, I was almost like, yeah, it's just like, fuck it, and that was like another kind of issue I was dealing with it. But, as I kind of shifted, that first, thing I did was kind of, stop making an identity around like, oh, I'm a cigarette, like I'm a smoker, like embodying that label, be more and more mindful of like the I am fill in the blank statements that we tell ourselves. It's like, oh, I am this, I am that, and especially if that's not really even true, because it's like, some people will have the opposite, where it's like, oh, I am guilty, I am not worthy, I am not this, I am not that, and it's just like self-deprecating, these cycles. And then what tends to happen is then it starts to be more and more of the reality that they steward. It starts to become more and more of a real thing. It's like people can sense that energy, and then there's a connectedness with all things. And so it's like the more that you kind of like, maybe you just seem like shy and unconfident, and maybe put off the kind of like this sketchy energy that makes people kind of like, what's going on with that person? It's like, are they up to something? And like it's all kind of related to your own inner conversations and inner talk, which you can start to test that for yourself as you change your inner conversations and your inner talk, and see how that starts to change your perception of reality. I mean, you could have like two people in the same room. One could be experiencing the Great Reset, and the other person can be experiencing the Great Awakening and just joy and happy and just, But the thing of it is not to fall for the appearance of things, but to rest in faith through the bridges of incidents. Because a lot of times things will start to happen that don't seem to make sense, especially to our old mind, which is constantly redefining things based on past assessment, which then kind of puts us in a box, especially when it comes to our beliefs and assumptions about what's possible, what can, it's like, the old mind almost would rather prefer to be in an abusive relationship that's known, versus it could be a great relationship that's unknown, but it would almost rather just stay in the abusive relationship because the unknown is so scary and it could be worse. It's like, yeah, what's going on is pretty terrible, but at least I know, at least I'm used to it. It's like kind of like the excuse that we tell ourselves, of like why we put up with it, but it's like, well, but if you just step out in faith, and believe what God, says is possible for you. God says you're a masterpiece, and, ultimately God's in control of everything. And the question to really start to ask yourself is, why is this happening? Why is God doing this to me? Or why is God allowing this to happen? Because that is a big, I don't know, it's a big program to unpack, because that's a big part of fear, is believing that God wants to attack you and like, put sickness on you and make your life miserable and like torment you and make you suffer endlessly. It's like, if you say God is love, I mean, let's step out of that. It's like, if you have even if you have a cat or a dog, I mean, it's like, do you want them to have sickness and death? I mean, do you want them to suffer and be tormented? It's like, you love this like person or this animal or whatever. It's like, you are capable of that and your ability to love right now. And it's like, so you're saying you on some level though have a fear that God would, who is love, love, life. All these are interchangeable kind of, but before I get hung up on semantics and labels and words, and trigger somebody, but it's like, just start, stop and think about it. It's like, well, why do I think that in the worst case is going to always happen? Why is God going to always test me in this super difficult way? Well, especially when you can look out to others that are also having a relationship with God, that are experiencing the total opposite. It's like, because what God does for one person, God will do for everybody, because we're all the same. We're all connected. We're all kind of mirroring different aspects of consciousness. And so, what one person, for one person, it's like everybody, it's for everybody. And like, that's a big part of like, trusting in Jesus, because if you can't see the divinity in like Jesus, how are you going to see it in yourself? Because we're all connected. It's like, if you listen to the teachings of Jesus, he's like compares you to like a friend, as brother. It's like, we're all, and this is something that's everybody's got to dig into for themselves, because it's going to be very triggering, especially for people that have like preconceived notions of things. My preconceived notion of like religion and God was like, some thing, in the sky with a beard, like sitting like in a courtroom, was like looking to like wait, just I say the wrong thing, and it's like, oh, he's going to hell, fuck him, get him out of here. That was kind of like, and I think that was like a lot of like religion, because I was like surrounded by a lot of religion in my area, because like where maybe in some areas of the country you see a lot of like different programming, like religious programming was very common around here, where it may not be like that other places. But not to say that is like a bad thing, or I'm actually really grateful and happy, now, that I'm in like an area where there's a lot of like people, like churches and stuff like that, and people that like are believers, which has been really nice, especially with like, what's been going on in like society with like mask mandates, like, and vaccine shit and everything else. And it's like, in my county just passed a thing that said basically that any future mask mandates or vaccine mandates are illegal. Like, it's just like not having it. No, like, people around here are not having this shit at all, and like, I'm really happy about that. But there was a time, where like I'd go to Lowe's or the grocery store or something like that, and like I'd be one of the few people that not wearing a mask, and like I made kind of a thing with my customer, my handyman business, where it's like, I'll go to Lowe's with you, but I'm not going to wear a mask, in the store with you. If you got a problem with that, that's fine. You can just get the materials and whatever, and I'll pick them up, without being around you, so you're not embarrassed or whatever. And that was very, I was very open and upfront with my customers about it, and if they had a problem with it, and there's nobody really did, and if they did, they just never called me back that I'm aware of, but like, that was like another, a drama thing of like, like with people I know, they're like, oh, what are you gonna do with like your business and everything? It's like, God didn't lead me down this road to cuck to the beast system now. It's like, it's just not going to happen. And so, and plus, like, it's so obvious to me that God provides, and hopefully share that with others that just like are choosing to do their own thing, which is probably what you've been dying to do anyway. Most people aren't very like thrilled with their work situation, what they're doing for their day. Is an excellent time to do what God has inspired you to do, to actually step out in faith and go for it, because like that's a big deal. It's like, it was one thing to listen to maybe somebody out here that says these things, it's another to jump in and put some skin in the game, and like Jesus would say, he's like, pick up your own cross and follow. It's like you have to step out in faith and do these things, and that's how you really start to experience the new you, which you already are these things, but you're just realizing it more and more so each day, because it's like everything, that you master, I guess, that you master, master an instrument or any of these types of things, it's like, it's through repetition and facing the fears, the resistance that may arise. But the more that you do that, the easier and easier it is to see the resistance as an illusion, revise it, as Neville Goddard would say, and just and then giving a new meaning. So another example is like, well, where some are seeing a great reset and are terrified of, some authoritarian thing, happening, which, it's like, I could see how that could happen, especially with so many people, apparently, under this spell. Which, I don't take that as that's the situation, mainly because I have seen that exact same situation before the masks and everything with this kind of this spell, this kind of what is it? I was listening to a guy. Let me pull it up. It was actually a really interesting conversation, and I listened to this guy before. I probably won't put it in the description, just because I've been kind of just being a half-ass about that. But like, and by the way, if you're listening to this on BitChute or on YouTube, it's like, it was on YouTube where I saw it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I have been moving more and more content to BitChute, which, it seems to be going well. It seems like a nice platform. I like their audio quality. It seems like it's a little bit better quality. But let me pull this guy up here, Aubrey Marcus. I don't know if you guys have listened to him. I've listened to his podcast a few times. It seems like he's definitely seeking truth, and which is very fun to find, others that are, putting out at least, what's going on from their perspective. It's like, it seems like everybody's like trying to piece this thing together in their own way. And it's one thing to be under the spell of just, parroting media narratives. It's another when you're actually a conscious being that's thinking and seeking and trying to figure things out, figure out the truth, and we're supposed to worship God in spirit and in truth. And so the truth is very, very important. And, Jesus would describe the truth as being like the bread of like the soul. It's like listening to a certain amount of truth every day does have a positive spiritual benefit, and plus it grows your faith, because faith comes by hearing. But like, Aubrey Marcus, he was, let's see, and I actually heard this professor on another show, Professor Mattias Desmet, and it's like Aubrey Marcus's channel. Why People Willingly Give Up Their Freedoms with Professor Mattias Desmet. It's like an hour, 90-minute, hour, 23-minute conversation. And he had labeled this kind of groupthink. The Bible would describe it as like the Antichrist spirit, kind of just the delusion, the spell, as mass formation, which he has kind of defined as a type of collective hypnosis. And he was able to kind of give some historical examples through like communist history, some of the World War II fascist authoritarianism. I think he's wrote a book on authoritarianism. Where you can almost look at the Bible as like as Revelations as a similar guide to this kind of phenomenon of this groupthink, collective hypnosis, where it's like constantly trying to it's not even conscious. A lot of it's unconsciously creating this one world system, this authoritarian shit. I think a lot of it has to do with building up this external without going within, but like I found that to be a very interesting way to look at things. If you kind of like this stream, you definitely check that out. But it has to kind of again do with perception and how you're viewing things, and how you're defining things, and the stories that you're telling yourself. Because like my old story, coming up through like the truth community, which would be the conspiracy land, for like the normie person who's just finding out the news is not telling him like the straight truth. It's like, welcome to reality. I mean, it hasn't been telling you the truth for 20 years, and so it's like, well, but now they're doing it. It's like, that's the same insanity loop. It's like, oh, they can't just continuously be lying. They got to, they've been lying for 20 years. They got to be telling me the truth eventually. It's like, you just, sometimes, you just got to admit, okay, I got had. They got me. I was a sucker. I was a sucker. I believed all that shit for a long time. Not recently, but like, me personally though, coming up through a lot of the shit I've seen, and this is what gives me hope is like there was a time before the pandemic where I felt like a satanic Truman Show. We're just like seeing all these people under this hypnotic spell, parroting the same narratives, and it's like, what is going on with you people? And you'd like tell them things about like reality, and they would have no memory and have no recall of any, even short-term memory in a lot of different ways. It's just like, what is going on with these people? And like, looking at them and like looking at like the story of Job, it's like, what do you do when like all these things are going on? So you start spinning out, and it's like, I haven't done anything, but like I'm just spinning out, and it's like, start praying for your friends and your family, especially the ones that you have labeled as unconscious, that might be believing the narratives, hook, line, and sinker at the moment. That doesn't mean that God can't deal with that. God lives in everybody, and so just, trust that God is going to take care of those people, and pray for them that they're awakening and part of the great awakening, and not this authoritarian spell of the future, this great reset, where in a lot of different ways, when you look at history of these authoritarian regimes, these group thinks, these mass spells, a lot of times that they end terribly for the people that are involved in the spell, and it's not so much the ones that like realize it's like, hey, this isn't real, it's the ones that have gone along with it, that are like the most into it. A lot of times the snake eats itself, it's like, and it self-destructs, and so it's really important to, instead of joining that insanity, to be the change that you wish to see, and be that example for those that are just now kind of like, what the fuck's going on? I need somebody, that didn't fall for this, to tell me what the heck's going on, to not only just like be that example, but then also, show that, you'll be okay. It's like, God's real, and God's in control, and God's inside of you. And it's like, the more that you're able to kind of connect with the promises of God that are, already out there in the Bible, and just believe that they're real, the more that you start seeing that mirrored in your life and your situations and your circumstances. And, don't just sit there and believe me, try it for yourself. And a lot of times, you'll see like the resistance first that's holding you in this like pattern, but look at everything, so kind of the spell I've got into, like the law of attraction, was like always like trying to bypass the present moment. Like, oh, if I just had this external thing, then I could feel a certain way. Whereas like the law of assumption is like you embody the state that it's like, oh, whatever external like material thing, realize everything material has a spiritual root. And so the more that you can connect with that energy first, that spiritual energy first, the more then that will be rewarded. Your faith in that will be rewarded, and it will start to just happen in God's timing. So it's like, you don't get out of scarcity by being more scarce. It's like, if you were in scarcity and someone gave you like $1 million, then you'd be afraid you're going to lose it, and you'd be spinning out the other way, and you still spend the present moment freaking out. It's really about getting out of this mental masturbating, these mental stories of like the future and the past, and just really just be able to enjoy the present moment and be fully engaged in what you're doing, and flow, being able to actually listen to people without, it's like, oh yeah, I hear a human speaking words. Meanwhile, I'm telling myself stories about what they're wearing, and oh, they're really attractive. I like their eyes, and I like this, and it's like, and then they get done, and it's like, yeah, okay, I was listening the whole time, but like being able to be more engaged in like what's going on in front of you, because what's going on and also in front of you is also a reflection of what's going on within you. And so the more that you're able to, kind of be present, be aware, extend a lot of forgiveness, because that's also forgiving yourself, and you'll feel better. instantly you start feeling better. And it's crazy the amount of resistance we have towards forgiveness, because as soon as, it's like we battle wanting to do it because it feels good to have vengeance thoughts. But it doesn't really feel good. It just feels like shit. And you keep, it's like, how dare that person? You start, wanting to attack them, punch them, be violent, wish the worst for them, all this kind of shit. And it's like, I don't want to let that go, even though as I'm doing that, I don't feel good as I'm doing that. It's like, it doesn't feel good to do that. And it's like, as soon as you forgive them, and you instantly feel a good energy in return. It's like, it just, as soon as you do it, it's just like, oh, why wasn't I forgiving them earlier? It's like that I'm doing it now, and I feel so much better. I feel like I just dropped a bag of bricks, and it's like I'm not sitting there just mentally just fucking lashing out. But it takes practice, to be able to do it easier and easier. But it's only ever now. Now is when you practice, and it's like, what do you find? Where do I find the next thing to work on? It's like it's coming. It's already came to you. It's like, what's keeping you from experiencing peace and joy right now? And that's the next thing to work on. It's like, how would you feel if that wasn't even a problem? So many times it's these stories that are we've already been telling ourselves, like, oh, if our spouse was only this way or that way, then I could be happy in our relationship. And if only I had more responsibilities, I can show that I'm worthy, and this and that. And it's like, well, those are your stories, and a lot of that's not true. Most of that's not true. And it's like, okay, well, I have a perfect relationship. I have just the amount of responsibilities I need. I'm inherently worthy because God created me. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I don't need to do this and now. It's like I'm already worthy because God created me. And that, you look out into creation, and everything has an inherent purpose. You see how things work, and everything has a purpose in this creation. It's like, including you're not separate from that. And it's like, so much of the old mindset is like you're a cancer to the world. It's like, it's funny because when you realize how much of that is just lies and horse shit. And it reminds me of these ants. It's like, you can look this up for yourself, but it's these ants, I can't remember what they're called, carpenter ants maybe. They basically go in the trees and they cut the leaves, and then they bury all these leaves in the soil, and it just adds so much biomass to the soil. It's really good for the soil and everything, but they're like the only thing that does that. It's like, thinking that you're the ant and like you're polluting the ground all the time. It's like it'd be like half the ants being like, this is horse shit. We're just polluting the dirt. We should find new ways to deal with it. Why are we even doing this to begin with? And it's like, meanwhile, you take a bigger up perspective. It's like, oh man, it's so great for the ecosystem that these ants are just doing now. It's like, you're doing that too. I mean, we're all doing that. It's like looking at yourself like you're cancer to creation when God created creation, and you in part of it. It's part of the awakening process, as far as I'm concerned. But a big thing to keep in mind too is, as you're like maybe shifting from scarcity to abundance, the blocks that have held you in that belief become brought to you. But then you're also seeing that collectively in the Great Reset, Great Awakening. So it's like the Great Reset seems like it's up in your face, but it's an illusion. The illusion is that that's real. It's not real. What's real is the awakening, and everybody is experiencing this, in consciousness right now. It's always happening now. It's not coming tomorrow, coming in the future, in some imaginary. In 3 months from now, things will be. We'll see what it. We'll keep. It's always going to be 3 months away to the old mind because it's never present. It's the new creation that you are is the new being inside of you that, without anything, that you exist, that you are aware that you exist. And, so much of like your consciousness is growing as you let go of these things. You naturally just float. It's like you are not fear ultimately, and you aren't these limiting beliefs. You aren't these labels. You aren't these stories. You aren't these this and now. You're part of this is you're finding out who you are through experience. The more that you kind of realize that this is going on, and it's always going on in the present moment. Everything else is these mental stories and these imaginings and these this and that, and when it comes to like the Great Reset, it's just the resistance confronting, because it's a reflection of consciousness, and even look at the Bible, you see how the thing plays out. You get the fear first, then you stand through those bridges of incidents in faith, and then you see what God does after, you see that faith being rewarded, and you see that, I can just say it all day long, it's like with, God providing, it's like, when you first start, maybe your own business or your own self-employment or any of these types of things, it's like, oh God, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this and that, and it's like, the more that you trust that God's your provider and everything's going to just like, you get a phone call, you just go do it, it's like you get an email, it starts coming to you, basically. It's like you get these bridges of incidents that happen, and the more that you just like go for it, you follow like the synchronicity, you follow like these coincidences. It's like, oh man, that subject of that email look real, the person who wrote that, it's like something about their name stands out, and it's like, oh, I think that's a sign. The more you go with it, the more you see it. I mean, it's just a fact, from my experience at least. But other than that, I think I'm going to balance. I just wanted to bring those kind of things to your attention for the time being, and hopefully relieve some fear, because I know a lot of people might be feeling fear, especially when it comes to the future, maybe feel hopeless, but it's just an illusion. These things are just temporary, as the body of Christ manifests more and more on earth. It's just, it's inevitable. This is the way it, creation, God's in control of everything. It's like the only thing, is just going through these identities, these assumptions, these beliefs, and everything else, and then it's like, well, Mike, what about the media and like the obvious satanic shit and just this and that, and it's like, God has already won, so it's like you're talking about like a defeated thing, which is ultimately at this point an illusion, because only God has power and control, over things. Thinking that there's some separate force out there that's separate from God's will is part of the illusion, and that's part of the sin of Adam, I believe, at least, is where you put your faith in that secondary power that's ultimately powerless. You give it the power by your faith and your belief in it, even though it's ultimately a shadow. And so, with that being said, I think I'm going to balance. I appreciate you guys liking, sharing, subscribing. I also appreciate your spiritual support and your financial support. Thank you for doing that. And other than that, until the next now, everybody, have a good rest of your whatevers, and God bless.